Hi, I'm Tony, and in this video I'll be showing you how to draw every single shape you'll ever need to know, from the really easy ones to the more difficult ones. Also, we're not gonna be drawing things like this. We'll be using constructive drawing, a fundamental art skill that everyone should know. Constructive drawing is a drawing process in which you build more complex subjects from basic geometric shapes. As for why you need to know constructive drawing, I mean, just look at these two shapes. By drawing things like this, you will most likely end up with something looking like this instead of this. Furthermore, some shapes are almost impossible to draw without using constructive drawing. Though you shouldn't really worry about these ones just yet. As you can see, I've ranked all the shapes we'll be going over today on this iceberg. We're gonna start with the top, where the easier shapes are found at, and make our way to the really hard ones at the bottom. And if this topic really interests you, I've added a bonus level at the end of this video. First shape on our list are the square and the rectangle. These two shapes are probably the easiest one we'll be discussing today, but also the most important, as we'll be using them alongside the cube and the cuboid to draw every other shape on this iceberg. So, a rectangle is a two-dimensional shape with 4 sides and 4 right angles whose length and width aren't equal. If a rectangle has an equal length and width, then it becomes a square. The most important thing you need to know about these two shapes is how to find their center points. Don't worry though, finding them is really easy. Simply connect the opposite corners with each other like this. Now you can divide the shapes into 4 equal parts by connecting the center with the midpoints of each side. Also, one more thing. Squares and rectangles drawn in perspective take the form of trapezoids. Next, we have the cube and the cuboid. A cube is a 3D variant of a square, meaning that its length, width and height are all equal, and it has only 90-degree angles. The cuboid is similar, but at least one of its dimensions is different from the others. The way I like to draw these two shapes is by starting with either the top or the bottom side, then I add the height and fill in what's left. But the way you draw them isn't important as long as you have a basic understanding of how shapes and vanishing points interact with each other. So what are vanishing points? Well, they are points where parallel lines viewed in perspective converge, like this picture of rail tracks. Obviously, these tracks don't actually intersect somewhere in the distance, but rather, they converge to the same vanishing point because they are parallel. 3D objects usually have 3 vanishing points, but they can also be drawn using more or less than that. Also keep in mind that vanishing points can sometimes be found outside the boundaries of your canvas. And since different sides of the cube have different positions relative to the vanishing points, they usually look different despite being identical in 2D. In most cases, you can get away with not drawing vanishing points by making sure that parallel lines converge towards where one would be found. Though make sure not to overdo it or underdo it. Now for our third and final entry on this level, we have the triangle. There are 4 types of triangles which you should know. The first, and arguably the easiest of the 4, is the scalene triangle. A scalene triangle is a triangle that has no equal sides or angles. There's no prep work needed to draw one, just pick 3 random points and connect them. Next, we have the isosceles triangle. The isosceles triangle is a triangle that has 2 equal sides and 2 equal angles. To draw one, you will first have to draw a line and mark its midpoint. You can either do this by measuring the length of the line, or by using the method I showed you during the square and rectangle chapter. Then, draw a line perpendicular to the midpoint and connect the 2 ends of your triangle's base to the same point on this line. The equilateral triangle is drawn mostly the same way as the isosceles triangle, with one exception. As the name implies, all the sides of an equilateral triangle are equal, which means you will have to measure these 2 lines and make sure they're equal to the base of your triangle. Last but not least, we have the right triangle. The right triangle is a triangle that has one 90-degree angle. This type of triangle can be a bit different from the rest, as it can be both scalene and isosceles. Also, by dividing a rectangle into halves, you will end up with two scalene right triangles. Doing the same to a square will get you two isosceles right triangles. When you draw triangles in perspective, use rectangles and squares like this. It'll make the process both easier and faster since rectangles are easier to rotate in space. Okay, so moving on to the second layer of the iceberg, we have the circle and the ellipse. The circle is a two-dimensional shape whose circumference consists of points equidistant from the center. This means that the distance between the center point and the boundary of the circle is equal throughout the shape. The distance between the center and the boundary is called the radius. The ellipse is different in this regard. An ellipse has a major or long axis and a minor or short axis, which are perpendicular to each other. To draw a circle, first draw a square and divide it into 4, using the method explained in the square and the rectangle chapter. And then, connect the 4 midpoints using a curved line. To draw an ellipse, follow the same steps, but use a rectangle instead of a square. Both the circle and the ellipse look like ellipses when drawn in perspective. But this new ellipse does not always share its minor and major axis with the original ellipse or circle. These new axes are perpendicular to each other, and the minor axis always follows a vanishing point. Try to remember this fact, as it will be essential for drawing spheres, cylinders, and cones, among other things. Speaking of which, next up we have the cylinder and the oval prism. A cylinder is composed of two parallel circles joined to each other. An oval prism is a cylinder that has elliptical bases. To draw a cylinder, start with a cube or a cuboid with two opposite square faces and draw a circle inside each one. Then connect the circles. The drawing process for an oval prism is the same, but rectangular faces are used instead of square ones. Also remember that both ellipses and circles look like ellipses in perspective. And if you are paying close attention during the last entry, you may notice that the sides of the cylinder are perpendicular to the major axis of the ellipse and parallel to the minor one. If your cylinder looks weird, drawing this wrong might be the reason. These next two shapes are derived from the cylinder and the oval prism respectively. A cone is a cylinder that tapers smoothly from one base to the center point of the other. And an oval cone is an oval prism that does the same thing. Drawing them is pretty simple. Just draw a cylinder or an oval prism and then connect the sides of one of their bases to the center of the other. The square pyramid. A square pyramid, similarly to a cone, is a cube or cuboid with two square faces that tapers from one side to the center of the other. Next, we have the hexagon. Fun fact, bees actually build round honeycombs, but because they press them too close together, the circles turn into hexagons. So guess which shape we'll be using to draw a hexagon? That's right, draw a circle using the method I showed you previously, and then divide the circle's diameter into 4 equal parts. Finally, draw two vertical lines going through these 2 points and then connect everything together. For our final entry on this level, we have the triangular prism. A triangular prism is composed of 2 triangles connected by 3 rectangular faces. These shapes can be drawn like all other prisms. Start with a cuboid and draw triangles on 2 of its faces, and then connect them. Also, you can use all previously mentioned triangle types to draw one. By the way, if you enjoyed this video so far or you learned something new, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. So without further ado, let's move over to the third level of this size bar. The first shapes on this level are the Hexagonal Prism and the Hexagonal Pyramid. We'll do these two shapes together, since you can draw one without the other. First, let's take a look at the Hexagonal Prism. Despite it looking like a really advanced shape, the drawing process is the same as that of every other prism. Start with a cylinder, which we already discussed, then draw a hexagon inside both of its bases. Finally, connect the corners of your hexagons. The hexagonal pyramid's drawing process is also similar to that of other pyramids. Once you have a hexagonal prism, connect the corners of one of its bases to the center of the other. You can use these two shapes to draw a variety of precious stones, as well as this place in Iceland. Next, we have the octahedron. This is actually the shape in which natural diamonds are formed. Octahedrons are made out of two square pyramids that share the same base but are oriented in opposite directions. There are two ways of drawing this shape. The first one is by drawing a cuboid and dividing it into two halves. Then, draw your pyramids inside of them. The second method is to draw two identical cuboids, one next to the other, and then draw a pyramid inside each of them. A tetrahedron is a pyramid that has a triangular base. For the most part, it can be drawn in the same way you would a square pyramid, with one exception, that being the center of its base. Since the base is a triangle instead of a rectangle, we'll need to find it in a different way. So how do we do that? Well, the center of a triangle is the point where all its medians meet. A median is a line that connects a triangle's corner with the midpoint of the opposite side. Once you found the center point, just connect one of your bases with the center of the other. You can use all four types of triangles as bases for your tetrahedron. Next, we have the hexahedron. Not to be confused with the hexagon, the hexa prefix means 6, and the two suffixes mean angle and face or base respectively. A hexahedron is composed of two tetrahedrons that face opposite directions. This means that it can be drawn in the same two ways as an octahedron. And the last shape on this level is the Hexagonal Bipyramid. You may also recognize this shape from the Sims logo. Anyways, I'm not gonna spend more time than I need to on this one, as it's drawn in the same way as the octahedron and the hexahedron. So, let's start with the next level. Finally, the shape everyone's been waiting for, the sphere and the ellipsoid. You probably don't need me to tell you why this one's important. The reason most head drawings look bad is because the person drawing them doesn't follow these guidelines. To draw a sphere, start with a cube and divide each one of its sides into 4. This will leave you with 3 new planes. Draw a circle inside each one of these planes using the method discussed during the circle entry. And finally, connect the 3 circles. So, a couple of things to keep in mind. the outer border of the sphere is a perfect circle. These three circles are depicted as ellipses, and therefore they have minor axes that follow the same vanishing point as the cube used to draw the sphere. The major axes of these ellipses are where the guidelines of your sphere begin and end. Also, the ellipsoid is drawn the same way, but using a cuboid instead of a cube. A hemisphere, as the name suggests, is half of a sphere, and there are a couple ways to draw it. The first way would be to draw a whole sphere and erase half of it. And the second way is to draw 4 identical cubes next to each other. You may notice that these 4 cubes actually form half of a bigger cube, and the dividing lines between them are actually the same lines you would use when drawing a sphere. So all you have to do now is to draw a circle on either the top or the bottom of your cuboid, and then draw curved lines going from these 4 midpoints to the center of the other side. Finally, connect the guidelines. As you can see, the major axis and the round side of the hemisphere should form a half circle. The Pentagon and the Pentagram. The Pentagon is a two-dimensional shape that has 5 equal angles and 5 equal sides. When it comes to drawing a pentagon, the first couple of steps are the same as those of a hexagon. Draw a circle and find the midpoint of its radius. Then, draw a line connecting the midpoint of the radius with the midpoint of one of the sides of your square. Measure the length of this line and mark the point on the diameter of your circle that is found at the same distance from the midpoint. Finally, connect the 2 points, measure the distance, and starting from the top, mark 5 points on the boundary of your circle and connect them. Also, keep in mind that the lines connecting the points 2 and 4 and 3 and 5 respectively should be parallel to the diameter of your circle. And now let's talk about the pentagram. The pentagram is drawn almost identically to the pentagon except for the last step. Instead of connecting each point with the neighboring points, connect them with other 2 points instead. And now we can finally move over to the last level of this iceberg, starting with a Metatron's cube. This shape is named after Metatron, a prominent angel in Judaism, Gnosticism, and Islam. The Metatron's cube is composed of 2 tetrahedrons that share the same center point but face opposite directions. To draw this cube, first draw a normal cube and mark the center points of every single one of its faces. Then, pick 2 opposite faces and connect their corners with each other like this. You should be left with 2 tetrahedrons facing opposite directions. Finally, draw 3 lines connecting the center points of the 3 sides of your cube that are visible from your point of view. A torus is pretty much a cylinder wrapped around a circle, just like a donut or a ring. The way I draw it is I start with a cuboid, then I draw a smaller one inside of it, and then a third one in between them. After that, I find the center of the sides belonging to the small and big cuboid, and I draw vertical lines going through each of them. Then I connect the ends of the vertical lines to create 4 new planes. After that, I draw circles inside each of them, And then I connect these points on each circle with their counterpoints using ellipses. Finally, I draw the outer border of the torus. This is the most difficult shape on this list, so I suggest rewatching this entire entry again and drawing along. The Pentagonal Prism and the Pentagrammic Prism. Both the Pentagonal and the Pentagrammic prisms can be drawn in the same way as any other prism. But of course, they wouldn't be on the 5th level if they were that easy to draw. The main problem you will encounter when drawing them is doing all the measurements in perspective. So here's a simplified way of drawing their bases that will get you similar results. As you can see, these points are 1/4 of the way between the center and the top of the square, and these two are 1/5 of the way between the bottom and the center. So instead of doing all the steps I showed you during the pentagon and pentagram entry, just draw a circle and measure these two distances. And now for our final entry on the basic shapes iceberg, we have the pentagonal and the pentagrammic pyramids. They are drawn the same way as all other pyramids, and by using the method showed in the previous entry, you should be able to draw them without any problem. You can also draw bipyramids using these two shapes, but I'm not gonna add an extra entry for it since they're drawn the same way as the octahedron, tetrahedron, and the hexagonal bipyramid. And now let's take a look at the bonus level. You probably already know that there are a lot more shapes out there than the ones we've discussed today. And you're probably wondering why I didn't include more. Well, there are two main reasons. One, some of them are really similar to the ones we've discussed today. And two, I can draw some of them without a reference. So what should you do if you want to learn how to draw one of these shapes? Well, most YouTube videos aren't really useful. I mean, when doing research for this video, I couldn't find a single one going over the construction drawing of a torus or even something as simple as a tetrahedron. What I suggest doing is whenever you find a shape you like, try finding its name and then search for 3D models of this shape on sites like Sketchfab. Anyways, that's pretty much everything I planned on discussing in this video. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned something new. Also, make sure to press the like and subscribe button and leave any questions you have in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye!